She's almost certainly the most popular politician north of the border. Now Scottish Nationalist Party leader Nicola Sturgeon is calling on Boris Johnson to grant Scotland a referendum next year on breaking away from the UK.
So to the Prime Minister, let me be very clear. This is not simply a demand that I or the SNP are making. It is the right of the people of Scotland. And you, as the leader of a defeated party in Scotland, have no right to stand in the way.
This was Sturgeon's reaction as the SNP took the seat of Jo Swinson, the Liberal Democrat leader. With 48 of Scotland's 59 seats in the Westminster Parliament, they say the message to London couldn't be clearer. But in the Scottish capital, already home to the devolved Parliament, not everyone agrees that another independence vote is now more likely.
I don't think Boris Johnson will let him have in the ref too. None. So, none. I think, quite honest, he'll start punishing Scotland.
SNP, Scottish referendum, hopefully it happens this time and Nicola gets it done.
When Scotland held a public vote on independence 5 years ago, the result was a clear no. But in 2016's Brexit referendum, 62% of Scottish votes were for Remain. With a no-deal Brexit at the end of next year still a possibility, the SNP says it's fighting to protect Scotland's economic interests.
She says she's got a clear mandate for a fresh independence referendum, and Nicola Sturgeon's determined to make the most of her moment. But just how much leverage will she have over Boris Johnson?
This expert says while in the short term little will change, the direction of travel is clear.
The certainty would come after the Scottish Parliament elections in 2021, where it would be really difficult for a UK government to continue to insist on no referendum. What I think it does show is a stark difference between Scotland and England. So Boris Johnson's Conservative Party lost MPs in Scotland but gained them in England. And I think it just highlights that stark difference between the political directions the two countries are going in.
These are troubled times for the United Kingdom. We still don't know how close a relationship it will have with the European Union. Scottish nationalists are hoping that uncertainty will play into their hands. Nadim, Al Jazeera, Edinburgh.
Barbara Serra joins us live from outside the UK Parliament. Barbara, does this election result really take us closer to a possible breakup of the Union?
Well, I suppose as we heard in that report, if you listen to the leader of the SNP and her insistence that Scotland does indeed need another referendum, then obviously yes. But we have to remember that Boris Johnson now has one of the biggest mandates we've seen, well, in 10 years or more since Tony Blair, and certainly when it comes to Conservative governments since Margaret Thatcher decades ago. So ultimately, he doesn't really have to give her a referendum and could try and get away with it that way. But it also depends on what kind of Brexit we are going to see when it does happen in over a year or a little bit over that. Let's speak to Stephen Barber now, who's political economist from Regent's University. Thank you so much for being with us. So they both have a strong mandate, Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland and, of course, Boris Johnson in the UK. Whose mandate is more important when it comes to a potential a second referendum for Scotland?
What we have on the horizon now is an almighty constitutional clash because, as you were saying, the SNP in Scotland have won the overwhelming number of seats and Nicola Sturgeon will take that as a mandate for a second referendum. Boris Johnson, on the other hand, has gone through this campaign saying, vote for me, and there won't be another referendum either on Brexit or on Scottish independence. So you've got these two mighty forces about to clash over the coming years.
And it was interesting when he was speaking in Downing Street a little bit earlier, he very much made a point about unity in the UK for Remainers, for historic Labour voters, and also he mentioned Northern Ireland and Scotland. Focusing on what he's going to do for the United Kingdom, how do you think he will deliver on his promise of unity?
I think that's very difficult to see. You'll see that this morning he's already started to kind of almost rebrand the Conservative Party as the One Nation Conservative Party. Ironic from a figure who's done as much as almost any other British political figure to divide the nation. But when it comes to the results from last night, of course, what Boris Johnson's been able to do is to pursuing a very, very risky electoral strategy, has picked up huge numbers of seats in the Midlands and the North, which were the preserve of the Labour Party. These are not the usual Conservative seats. They're former mining towns, and they have voted Conservative. So he needs to keep those voters on side. He needs to be a Prime Minister not just for the usual Conservative voters, but actually for a much wider electorate. So you can see that coming out in the sort of things that he's saying.
So you think we might see new faces in Cabinet, for example?
I think one thing that this election does, it releases him, if you like, from the grip of the hard right of his party, the European Research Group, the ERG. At the same time, you've got these new members of parliament elected in the Midlands and the North who don't really represent, they don't look like those, the Buff and Tuffens of the Shires, the Knights of the Shires. So I'd be very surprised if he didn't start to bring some of those into government and start to reshape the government and looking more like the one nation that he's talking about.
And presumably, of course, a lot of these new members of parliament will be very loyal to him because that's how they got their seats. Looking ahead to the 31st of January, of course, when the transition period is meant to begin, how do you see the next few weeks playing out? What do you think he's going to do before Christmas?
I think when it comes to the one policy that he really has, which is supposedly to get Brexit done, vague as it is, I think there's two things we can probably say now about Brexit. The first is that he will now have no real trouble getting his withdrawal bill through the House of Commons. He has a majority of 80, as you said, they're very loyal members of Parliament. They've all pledged to do that, so he'll get that through with very little difficulty. So that kind of last hope that Britain could remain in the European Union, I think, has gone, and we will certainly get that piece of legislation through the House of Commons. I think we'll see that going through the House of Commons probably by the end of this calendar year. Beyond that, I was just going to say that there is a difference because he is now released from the grip of the ERG. It means he does have his own almost personal mandate, if you like, to pursue the kind of Brexit that he wants. And that might mean a softer Brexit. It might mean being more conciliatory to other parties. It might be more conciliatory to other viewpoints in the country.
Stephen Barber, political economist from Regent's University. Thank you so much for sharing your views with us here. So there you go. We've certainly heard a speech from Boris Johnson that did seem to be more inclusive and speak more about unity. It'll be interesting to see over the next few weeks and months whether we do indeed see perhaps a new side to him and the Conservative Party.
Barbara, Sarah, thank you very much indeed.